That's good. Yeah, that's a good one. When Meghan Sussex released her latest offering last week, a podcast entitled Confessions of a Female Founder, in which she interviewed Bumble CEO and BFF, Whitney Wolfe Herd, the reactions were predictably dire. The Guardian said, Meghan's sycophantic interview podcast is stomach-turning, giving the podcast just 2 stars. The Telegraph also gave it 2 stars, saying Meghan's podcast is an inane stream of mindless aphorisms. One British TV station even went so far as to call the podcast insane, which feels like an over-exaggeration for what was essentially 45 minutes of chit-chat between friends. Is the podcast particularly insightful? No.
You know, when your brain goes in a loop,
Yeah.
those 3 a.m. loops, and it's just like you can't stop
I know.
overthinking the thing, and how are you going to address that, and oh gosh, how are we going to pivot, and does it matter?
But is Meghan really deserving of all this vitriol? Also no. She's become the woman people love to hate, an easy target who really doesn't behave that differently from other celebrities. Some have called it the industry of hate, and Meghan is the woman at the centre of it. But why? Until 2016, Meghan Markle was just your everyday actress. She'd had a starring role in Suits, her own lifestyle blog, The Tig, and a host of famous friends. So far, so normal, in Hollywood terms.
So yeah, Meghan and I were friends, and we had a really nice friendship for a few years until she met Harry and then decided that it was time to maybe bump off some of her friends and carry on with the others. She was very altruistic, very confident. She was looking at opportunities to get modelling gigs, and she really loved sort of UK, sort of what we stood for. She loved England, she loved the countryside, so she felt very akin to that.
But in 2016, after it was revealed she was dating Prince Harry, things were set to change. And almost overnight, she became one of the most talked about women on the planet.
One great thing about Meghan was that she was this huge breath of fresh air, and I think a lot of people identified with that. People who might not necessarily have even thought about the royal family suddenly did.
Theirs was the romance that spawned 1,000 think pieces, and many of them were not good. People dug into her relationships, her career, and the fact that she was once on Deal or No Deal.
There is an air of, why couldn't Harry pick a nice English rose like William did? Definitely an undercurrent, an undertone of that. With anything that Meghan the Duchess of Sussex does, of course, she's always held to a higher standard. You know, glamorous, former actress, humanitarian, someone completely different, a biracial woman within the family. Everything has to be absolutely supremely fantastic. Anything that she does comes under the same level of savagery and scrutiny. And there is a whole industry built around disliking her. Like it's a job for some people.
Meghan is the greatest PR person in the world because she can generate, views, and Netflix loves her for that, and click-throughs and listens, etc. But also she's her own worst enemy. In many ways, her face is success of a brand and built it that way. One of the things that I see now with her and as ever and the brand that she has, that's what she wanted to do all those years ago. She was an influencer for her time.
There is a certain Americanness to her and to a lot of Americans, and not just her, that a lot of British people just doesn't really sit right with them. And that's absolutely fine. But then you've got this added level of vitriol, of hate for her.
So where does the vitriol come from? And what does it say about modern British attitudes towards royalty and celebrity?
Listen, celebrity is built on basically a deity. They're seen as a bit of a god to people, and people worship them, and that's why they have their fan mails, and that's why they have their Instagram followings, and you can tell, their followers. It's like Jesus, and the fact of the matter is, that's what they're like.
There's this real sort of looking down your nose at an actress, at someone who's divorced, at someone who's American, that someone's a bit older than their spouse. That is such a classist way of thinking as well, along with the racism and the misogyny, along with this kind of snobbery that we have.
It might seem that we've reached peak saturation with our royal fixation, but really, this is nothing new, particularly when it comes to women in the royal orbit.
What you will find is women who marry into the royal family, if you look back in history, always get a hard time. The women in the royal family get a hard time, but women who marry into the royal family get a harder time. Sarah, Duchess of York, look what was written about her and her way. Princess Diana, all the things that were written about her.
And then you've got obviously people like Wallis Simpson, you know, who again were being given all this amazing jewellery and was seen to be somebody who made someone abdicate in the end. So, you know, all eyes have been on the royal family. They don't get away lightly.
She's loved now, but Catherine, Princess of Wales, was once dubbed Waity Katie because of how long she waited for Prince William to propose. Princess Diana faced relentless backlash and scrutiny for breaking royal protocol, particularly after her Martin Bashir interview, which was seen to bring scandal on the royal family.
Diana played her role as a superstar celebrity, not as a member of the royal family. Princess Anne plays it as a member of the royal family. She doesn't play it as a celebrity. And Meghan herself has always played it as a celebrity.
Queen Camilla faced years of criticism and was even called too common to marry into the royal family. I mean, even Princess Beatrice's hat made headlines. But the sheer scale of the backlash towards Meghan is in a class of its own, especially because she's not even a royal anymore.
The great British press have decided, mostly, have decided that Meghan Markle is the villain. She's the villain of the piece, and the piece being the ever-arching narrative of the royal family. She is the villain of the piece. She will continue to be the villain of that piece. That absolutely suits their narrative. It's not going to be Prince William, it's not going to be the Princess of Wales or the King or Queen or even Prince Harry, although he does get his fair share of savagery in the press. It is Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex.
This kind of latent racism kicked in and a lot more bullying than we'd seen before. And that was a real shame on Meghan and Harry. And I can see that must have been so difficult for them to navigate.
Things only got worse when she and Harry denounced their royal titles in 2020.
It's the audacity of her to continue in spite of everything that has been written about her. That's what it is. So how dare she continue? How dare she not crumble under all this pressure, scrutiny, and hatred that we have poured on her?
So is there more at play here? Harry is fifth in line to the throne. It's unlikely he would ever become king, and even then, there's no guarantee he would want the role. So where does our fixation with him, and therefore the woman he's with, come into play?
Everybody saw this young boy, you know, behind the coffin, and they felt they wanted to adopt him. And when people have grown up with him and they've seen him with Chelsea Davy and they've seen him on various different dates, we feel that we've wanted to be there for him.
Basically, the pair are damned if they do, damned if they don't. Who can forget the infamous Oprah interview where they tried to share their side of the story?
But I also am acutely aware of where my family stand and how scared they are of the tabloids turning on them.
Because, I'm sorry, I see right through it. It's complete nonsense. The hypocrisy is off the charts.
You know, I look at her as the Katie Price with a Duchess title. She's similar to that in many ways. Katie Price is somebody who spent all her life basically monetizing every single part of her existence, whether that is about her tragedies, whether that's about her love life, whether that's about her brand. And that's really what Meghan's doing. She's utilizing every single part of her existence and she's getting money from it. That's one of the biggest problems with Meghan Markle or Meghan Sussex, is that she isn't genuine, or people perceive her to be disingenuous.
Recent YouGov polling shows that Meghan's popularity in the UK has plummeted, with only 4% of adults saying that they feel very positive about her. This drops even lower among boomers, unsurprisingly, where the number sits at a dismal 1%.
We are, as a nation, as we know, stiff upper lip. So when you see her on a show like Oprah, talking about things that we kind of maybe not address ourselves in the UK, then we're like, okay, now you're p***ing us off. Now you're really annoying us. In America, it's very different. They love a confessional. They love to see this kind of, this woman, you know, who's been wronged, part of the royal family, a fairy tale, suddenly, you know, actually, she's saying that she's in the ashes and now she's like a phoenix. So she's playing to two different demographics of people.
When With Love Meghan dropped on Netflix in March, she occupied even more airtime, with people criticising her for being...
Oh my gosh, Meghan Markle is insufferable.
This is despite the fact that it became a top 10 hit on Netflix in both the UK and the US. And it's already been commissioned for a second season, which will come out in the autumn.
You've got all these people who will also make a business and make a thing out of hate listening, so I'm gonna listen to it because I hate it. That I could never. I could literally never. It's like a psychosis. It doesn't make any sense. And is it because they want to say they've listened to it so they can hate it with knowledge? Okay, sure. And then you've got people who will just not even listen and then tell you it's trash, and that is just annoying.
So yes, people love to hate Meghan, but she's the one having the last laugh. Her As Ever range sold out in just 30 minutes, including 20-pound jars of honey. And her podcast, however slated, made it into Apple's top 10, number 6 in the podcast charts, and was the number 1 business podcast within 24 hours of its launch. So why the outrage?
I think that in the UK we have an attitude towards her. I think that it is pretty unconscious, but actually it's kind of conscious in many ways because people want to love to hate her.
I'll be honest, I don't think unconscious bias exists, right? I don't believe in that term. I don't think it's a thing. It's about acknowledging a bias that you have and thinking about how you can undo that and regard yourself and other people better. People don't want to think that about themselves. They don't want to think that I'm racist, or I'm misogynistic, or I'm a snob, or I'm classist. They don't want to accept that that is a thing in society. They don't want to accept that that might be something that they have perpetuated, and so there'll just be a complete denial and put the blame back on her.
So whether you love her or hate her, you've really got to question whether being so obsessed with one woman is healthy. It's certainly not as healthy as these flower petals.